Hello and welcome to Kerbal Space Program with me, the Magic 8-Ball. It's the first video ever for me, and also first video, of course, by default, for Kerbal Space Program. And I haven't written a script out for this video. I felt like I probably should, basically because I didn't want to bore anyone, and I feel like that's a very professional thing to do, especially since I do want to try to make this a thing, sort of a side project. But we'll go from there, from where we are from now, and just kind of have a little fun with this today, and just play a little Kerbal Space Program. So what I wanted to start with today, I started a new save file specifically for YouTube, and we're going to start putting some stuff into orbit, and I'm going to show you exactly how that is done. So getting a look here, you'll see this is Kerbal Spaceport, and we have several different buildings here. We have the spaceplane hangar over here, where you can build space planes and try to build the elusive single-stage cargo-bearing spaceplane that is reusable and landable. And there have been many people who have tried to make once again a single stage takeoff landing space plane that can carry cargo, and it's very hard to do. I understand some people have done it, but I have yet to see one that was legitimate, so maybe we'll try to do that at some point. I, however, am not very good at designing space planes. Airplanes, I can make them fly, but I'm not very good at them. Rockets, I'm getting pretty good at those, and again I'll show you a lot of that pretty soon. This is the vehicle assembly building. This is where you put together rockets, as you can see how tall it is, and that you have the causeway, I guess you would call it, leading to the launch pad. Over here we have the tracking center, which looks really cool with some of the newer updates where they changed it from just being one little satellite dish to being a number of them. I hope one day that they will add communications into the game, as in that will be something that is necessary for your spaceships to function. But who knows? That's all in the future. Over here we have the astronaut complex. This is where you can look at the different Kerbals that you have already in your program and the people who want to be in your program. Now this is all basically done for you. You don't really have to come in here and mess with these guys at all. You start out with the 3 bases. We have the legendary Jebediah Kerman, and of course Bill and Bob accompanying him. Then of course you can pick, if you want, if you like somebody's name, you can pick and add them. Chad Boss will get him just because his name's Chad Boss. What the hell? It sounds cool, so we'll go with that. Alright, so let's go ahead and go to the vehicle assembly building and let's make a rocket. Oh, one other thing, you can go directly to the launch pad, and if you have ships saved, you can go ahead and launch those from here. Now, these are you see this says stock in parentheses. These are the ships that come already saved in the program, just so you can kind of get an idea of what you can do if you wanted that. There are also tutorials in the main menu. You can do the tutorials. Some people think that they weren't able to learn very much from them, and other people were. I found them fine. I was able to learn enough to start playing the game from the tutorials, but I wanted this video to sort of be a tutorial, just to kind of give you a basic idea of what to do when you first start playing Kerbal Space Program, and let you begin building your own program indeed. So you just get out of here, go into the vehicle assembly building. The music will start to play, and I believe I have adjusted the sound levels to where you'll be able to hear this. I hope I have, because I would hate to have ruined this entire cast. We'll hope that that didn't happen. So one thing to note here at the start is I do have a couple of mods. So I do not have an entirely stock program. All I have 2 mods. I have actually technically I have 3. Excuse me. I have a subassembly loader, and we'll get into that some other time. I have a docking camera, which makes things really handy, and again we'll get into that another time. And I have a pack of parts that don't come with the game, but they are really cool. But I'm not going to use any of those today. I'm going to use all stock parts. So we're going to start. We want to send a Kerbal into the air. We don't really care where he goes. We just want to put him in the air. So we're going to start with this command pod here, command pod Mark 1. Only seats 1 guy, and it's meant for small rockets. We can't really do a whole lot with it, but it's fun to play with. And some people even use it for rovers and various other things. We're going to make a fun little tiny rocket with it. So we have our command pod. Now you'll need a certain number of things to go into space. We're not really aiming for space yet. We're just playing around. So let's go to the propulsion. We do know that since we're a rocket, we need fuel and we need an engine. So let's go in here, and this engine looks about right. So if you take this out, and you can see that it fits on there. Great. There are different sizes, so you can see that this one way too big. Now, of course, I could put this on here if I wanted to, but you know, that kind of looks dumb. And you can make it look a lot better, but we're not gonna mess with that right now. What we are gonna do is we are going to add 1 more fuel tank, because why not? So you can see this fuel tank here and this fuel tank here is pretty good for this size rocket. Now we're gonna go put an engine on this thing. There are lots of different engines. Again, there are some that are way too big. You can see this makes no sense whatsoever. I don't even know if that would work. I guess it would work. Let me put it there. But for the sake of posterity, we're just not going to do that. We're going to use a rocket that actually fits there. Now we'll go into what all these numbers mean. We can see that there's lots of different numbers in the description here. Max power, minimum power, etc., etc. We'll go into that eventually. Discuss what all that means. And I am not by any means a physicist, but I do have a basic understanding of the numbers, and I'm understanding the math behind them more and more each day, which is one of the beauties of Kerbal Space Program. It actually, in a way, it teaches you without you even realizing it, I think. Maybe it's just because I'm so interested. Let's just go ahead and one thing, we don't want to kill Jebediah, because he's going to be the guy in here, so let's go ahead and throw a parachute on here. We'll find those in the utility section. So yeah, so it looks like we've got a rocket. We've got our guy in the pod, we've got our fuel, we've got a rocket engine, and we've got a parachute so he doesn't die on the way down. We hope. So one thing we might want to do, now we could just launch this and it would probably just sit on its engine just like that, because it's probably pretty stable. We have these tools down here. We have the center of mass we can look at. So if I click this button, you can see this ball comes up, and we can move our camera around, and we can see that our center of mass is basically centered, which is great. Means our ship should control fairly well. It also means that our camera will be centered. One of the things you will find out if you play Kerbal Space Program is the camera, when you're in flight, focuses on the center of mass. So if you have a rocket that is really heavy in the bottom, really light in the top, you'll find yourself focusing at the ass of your ship, which is great. Not. Okay, so let's go to the structure, and let's add something that's going to make ourselves a little stable. The Launch Stability Enhancer, otherwise known as a launch tower. We'll go ahead and do 2 of them. Don't know why it doesn't want to do that. There it goes. Sometimes it's a little finicky. And yeah, I'm gonna say that's about ready. Now there is one thing that we need to do before we launch this thing, and it is something that I do sometimes forget to do, and it can make a terrible mess of things. And Coming to think about it now, I probably should have just let it happen. But so this is the staging area. This is where you set up what happens when during your flight. So you can point at things in the stage and it will highlight them. So this is obviously the stability enhancers that I've installed here. This is obviously the parachute, and this is the engine. So what we need to do to launch this is we need to have the engine start at the exact same time that these let us go. Now of course you could have the engine start first and throttle it up and have it be dramatic and stuff and then let these go, and that's fine, it won't break anything. You can do that if you want to, but you're really just wasting fuel, so we're not going to do that. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to move these down. You'll notice what I just tried to do there. I tried to just drag it straight down. That doesn't work, and I think that's actually a safety feature, so you don't accidentally do that when you're trying to click around. So that's probably a good thing, but a lot of times it annoyed me. But I guess it's, you know, as I said, probably a safety feature. So we've got our stability enhancers. Our tower is ready to go first, and then we're going to move our engine down into the same stage. And we have our parachute on the top. So that should go well. We're going to name this YouTube Tester for no apparent reason, obviously. Now let's launch this. And what we're going to have to do here is when you launch your rockets, when it loads up, there will be a small period of time where the physics engine has not kicked in yet. So we'll notice here that the rocket will suddenly shift. You can kind of see it. This is a very light rocket, so it didn't move very much, and there's not very many parts to it, so it didn't take very long. The bigger rocket you get, the longer it will take for the physics engine to kick in, and the longer it will take to load, and the slower frame rates you will get, because the physics engine is calculating gravity on every single piece of your rocket, just like it should in real life. So we're going to go ahead and throttle up using the left shift key. You can throttle down with left control, and you can kill your throttle with the X button. I don't think you can click that. So we'll go ahead and throttle all the way up. Now, one of the things that you have at your disposal is SAS. This is essentially a guidance computer. It keeps your, well, it's intended to keep your rocket or craft pointed where you have it pointed. You enable this by pressing T, and you'll see it pop up, SAS, right there. You can also temporarily toggle it by holding F, and it will just revert it to whatever opposite of it. So for example, if you wanted to set a new heading, you could hold it, move the ship, or turn your ship, and then release it, and it would come back on. So we'll get into that later, but some people like to use it during launch. I use it sometimes during launch. One of the things about SAS is when you use excuse me, when you have larger vehicles, it tends to make the ship wobble because it's constantly correcting. And you can see down here, this is where you can see how much control you're putting into the craft. So you can see as I move left and right, my yaw changes. And I can use the keys to roll or pitch up and down. This is, of course, the typical ASDF, and then Q and E are your rolls. And it is like an actual aircraft. So pulling back, so pressing S, or technically pulling back on the stick, as you might think, will pitch you up, and pushing forward will pitch you down. So just like an airplane. Now we also have the gimbal down here on the UI, and the gimbal is how you align yourself. Now it's a little tough to get used to it, and it's a little hard for me to explain in precisely how it functions, but essentially the blue areas, of course, means you are pointing away from the surface of Kerbal in this case. And if it were brown, and it's brown on the opposite side of this ball here, that would mean you're pointing at the surface of Kerbin. And this orange line here, that is north in relation to Kerbin. And that will change. Now, if you're thinking this is north, you might expect this to be east. Since this is north, you might want to just flip yourself upside down, and you might expect this to be east. You would in fact be wrong, because this is east. I don't know exactly how that works. I can't explain that to you. But once you're in space, it makes a whole lot more sense. It functions properly. It's just about how we're sitting on Kerbin that makes it a little bit more complicated. So you'll see about that once we get into orbit, assuming we get this into orbit. I don't know if it's going to make it, obviously. I never used one quite this simple. So here we go. Once again, I've throttled all the way up. I've set my guidance computer. Up here we see our sea level altitude, 77 meters. You see that we are in the thickest part of the atmosphere here. This is, of course, if we got to here, we would officially be out of the atmosphere and into space. This is our vertical speed right here. So at this point we're at 0. We're not going down and we're not going up. And just to finish out the UI kind of overview, we have our time acceleration over here. It shows our mission timer, which is standing at 0 because we haven't launched yet. And we have our warp. If we wanted to warp time ahead, we could move into the night. If we wanted to launch at a specific time to hit a specific window, because those are things that real rocket scientists do, and that's what we like to do on here. So let's go ahead and launch this baby, finally. Pressing the spacebar will hit the next stage of your staging. So here we go. And off we go into the wild blue yonder. As the song goes, we can see Mun, or the moon, over here. Just barely visible in the daylight. I like how they did a pretty good job with the effects on this. And you see as we get higher, it becomes easier to see. Because obviously Kerbin is not to the scale of the Earth, so it doesn't take quite as long to get out of the atmosphere as it might otherwise, and the planet isn't quite as big as Earth. However, the physics of the game are really close, if not, I wouldn't say they're 100% accurate for sure, but the physics of the game are designed to be pretty accurate, and they certainly function in most cases like you would expect objects to function in real life. Sometimes, of course, it is a game, and there are other things that will happen. Excuse me for a moment. I'm just going to take a drink of water here. Wow, one does not expect how talking for so long will affect oneself. Now, I have completely missed my typical gravity turn. Gravity turn is where we turn into the rotation of the planet, and this is to give us a good orbital velocity. Now, you'll see that I'm pulsing the SAS here a little bit, and I actually turned that way too low. I want to aim more like right along here, because we're not going to establish a full orbit with this. We don't have enough fuel. But you can see we just passed through the thickest part of the atmosphere, and you can see how the sky lightened up. As would happen in real life, you can now see the stars in the day cycle of Kerbin, which is really cool, and I would love to see this in real life. So you can see the nebulaic band of the galaxy spinning around, and of course the sun, which is simply just titled the Sun in Kerbal Space Program. And we have these nice little galaxies in the distance, and there's actually galaxies that you can see in real life with using a telescope. The Andromeda Galaxy is actually fairly close to us in astronomical terms in relation to galaxies, which means it's hundreds and hundreds of light years away, but hey, it's it's there, and it's going to hit us. Actually, it's on a collision course with us in the next few billion years. So nothing to worry about now. But anyway, so you can see that we've gained a lot of altitude. We are actually 109 kilometers, and as I shut up there, you can kind of hear the music. I've turned it down a little too low, perhaps, but we'll deal with that in a later video. 117 kilometers now, so we're going to hit M and go into the map, and we see this. This is, as you can see, Kerbin, and we can zoom out a little bit. You can see Mun and Minmus. Minmus is the second moon, which is on a slightly angular orbit, as you can see, and very elusive target for the budding astronaut. And we can zoom out. We can see the whole excuse me, we can see the whole solar system, and we'll go through that at some point, but we're focused on our rocket right now because he doesn't have a whole lot of time. He's got about maybe 10 minutes, yeah, about 8 minutes before he re-enters and hits the ocean there. So we're going to go over a little bit more about what we have here. So I'm going to go ahead and bring the gimbal up by pressing the period key on the number pad, which will bring up the gimbal if you are in the map, or if you can bring it down if you're not in the map. You can get rid of it if you want to. Now, what we have here is our orbital trajectory, you can see. Excuse me. And this is our apoapsis, and that's at least how I pronounce it, apoapsis, or apogee, if you rather do that, I guess. So essentially, this is the highest point in your orbit. So according to this, 215 kilometers will be the highest point I reach from the surface of Kerbin. That's not a bad height. I probably could have got this into a mostly stable orbit, actually, with that kind of velocity, or delta V. Delta V is something that I actually need to look up the actual definition of delta V. I know how I understand it, and I don't want to confuse you all by telling you how I understand it. So we'll go into that once I have read the actual definition and perhaps understand it for real. But let's just say that we don't have enough of it, and or at least we use too much of our delta V in this ascension. So we're going to end up going back, because if you might have noticed, we are out of fuel. Down here you can see that liquid fuel is empty. You can also click on resources up here. We can see that we have some electric charge, because this doesn't use it very fast, and it holds a little bit on its own. And the engine actually does produce while it's powered up, but of course there's no fuel. As you can see up here, we have no fuel and no oxidizer. This uses at the same exact rate, so it doesn't matter that the numbers are different, even though that, you can see that there's more oxidizer than liquid fuel, even though we have the same number of tanks. This uses at the same rate, so you don't have to worry about having different amounts unless you transfer different amounts, and we will go into that in a different video. Back again to our apoapsis here, you can see it says T-minus 13 seconds. That means in now 10 seconds we will be reaching our apoapsis. So we can take a look at Kerbin. You can press F2 to get rid of the UI and just have a nice look at your surroundings. There's a pretty nice view from up here. Kerbin is obviously inspired by Earth. There are definitely some continents that are familiarly shaped. There's even a boot section. This kind of looks like a large version of Italy, I guess. And there are some places that I've wanted to visit on Kerbin that I have not done yet, because again, I am not very good at building space planes, and even though it's definitely possible to aim a spacecraft and land wherever you would like on Kerbin, I haven't spent a whole lot of time trying to do that. Maybe that is something we will do in a future video. Who knows? Because I would like to visit this large raised island that is not really all that far from Kerbal Space Center. That is the space center that we launched from right there. On this Africa-looking continent, or South America-looking continent. You would see that depending on where you're looking at it from. So I want to go there, and then on the opposite side of the planet, literally almost on the exact opposite side of the planet from Kerbal Space Center, there is a set of islands. There's one specific island out in the middle of an ocean, so it would be like there was an island like right here. Just one little small island. And I definitely want to check that out at some point. So, yeah, we're coming back down into the atmosphere. We're getting close to it anyway, I believe. Let's bring our UI back up. No, we got a while. We got a little. So we're at 196 kilometers and falling. You see our vertical speed is down past the negative. I believe that's negative 100 mark, and that is the negative. I don't even know what that is. I hope it's not negative 1,000 because it's a little scary, but it probably is true that we are hurtling towards the ocean on planet Kerbin at over 1,000 miles per hour. I would not doubt that. Now, in real life, we would have a problem because we are traveling way too fast. We would burn up in the atmosphere. Also, we don't have anything to separate all this from our command pod. So, assuming that if this were a heat-shielded command pod, like in the Apollo programs and other, and pretty much every space program has some sort of heat shield on the method they used to get back into the atmosphere. Otherwise, they would have died, of course. But assuming that this would be the heat shield, we would be screwed because we couldn't detach this. We don't have a decoupler. We'll get into that soon. I'm going to go ahead and speed this up now to send us. So you can see that went really fast. I sped it up as fast as it would go for that moment there, just to go ahead and send us back into the atmosphere. Now you can see that we definitely are traveling at really fast as we travel into the atmosphere here. So we will get a re-entry fire. So you'll see the pretty effects that they've added fairly recently in the game. However, re-entry is not deadly at this moment. Now there is a mod that will make it such, but I do not have that mod. It's cool because we're right at the day line, so we're getting kind of a cool little sunspot here, and so here we are. You can see now it is accurately simulated as far as where the air should be coming from, so that's appropriately about right as far as our velocity, how we're moving into the atmosphere. This re-entry flares happen between like 30 and 10,000. Once you get down below 10,000, you get 12,000 apparently. You get this. Some people call it a Mach, or a essentially just a kind of a jet trail there. Now we've slowed down considerably. The atmosphere has done its job, which technically would have killed us. Now it will rip off solar panels and weak things of that nature, but it will not destroy a vehicle without that mod. Alright, so we're kind of low now. You can see we're about 3 kilometers up. We can go ahead and hit our parachute. You know, normally, again, we would want to separate all this, and I'm not sure how this is going to go. It will either separate when the parachute actually deploys in a moment, when it goes into its full deployment. This will either fall off or it will stay attached, and if so, the whole thing will be in the ocean, and theoretically it could be used again. And it did. It survived. A lot of times, the force behind a parachute in Kerbal Space Program, as I mentioned, will rip your spacecraft apart at the seams, as it were. It would literally have just right here where your pod couples here would just and fall into the ocean or onto the land, whichever you happen to be over. Now, one thing, when you're in the atmosphere, if you use time acceleration, it does have the possibility of damaging your craft because the physics engine is not perfect. So I'm going to rush that in. Normally it would give you a warning and say, hey, you might not want to do this because it might screw you up. As you can see, it happened to destroy my fuel tanks, which, who cares? It doesn't matter. We didn't need them anyway. But Jebediah has lived, so we can recover him, and we can call this a successful mission. Certainly not a successful orbit, but we did send a man outside of the atmosphere, or a Kerbal, excuse me, outside of the atmosphere. So that is a cool thing. And right here at sunset, there is your screenshot. There it is. There's the screenshot of the video right there. Booyah. Okay. So, now, once we've landed, there are a couple things we can do. If you don't like how it went, or if you were just having fun, you can just hit escape and revert flight. This, you can send it back to the launch and try again. Or you can go back to the vehicle assembly building and redo it. And if your pilot died, this is really loading the save file is what you're doing. So none of it ever happened if you do it this way. Now, this is fine. I'm not worried about how this turned out. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to the Space Center right here. Excuse me while I take a drink of water right quick. Alright, now let's go to the tracking center over here. Now the tracking center again is where you can take stock, I guess, of everything that you have in space. So it's essentially just the space map as you saw earlier. We can zoom out, we can see the solar system here. Zoom back in here, and so we can see YouTube tester slashed down, and it gives us the latitude and longitude of that craft. We can also see it over here, the YouTube tester. MET is the mission elapsed time. At least I assume that's what it stands for, and I know that's what it actually is, really. So anyway, we can click on it. It says focus YouTube tester. Now we can recover it. It won't let us delete it because there's no reason to delete it. We might as well just recover it. Now if this was in space, or it was still in a position where it could, well yeah, I guess if it was still in space, we could just delete it. And of course that would kill poor Jebediah. I'm not exactly sure what happens when you delete them. I suppose that they just explode. What a terrible way to go. Although I suppose in space it would be fairly quick. Let's not get into that dark discussion. However, now we could fly it. We could just go look at where we just were and hop in the ocean and not be able to do anything, or we can recover it. So we're going to recover this. Yes, we are sure we want to recover it. So there we go. Now, recovering. Why would you recover stuff? What's the point of it? The thing about recovering at this moment in Kerbal Space Program, Kerbal Space Program is still in alpha. So it's released in a way similar to Minecraft. If you remember how Minecraft works, you could buy it even while it was in alpha. And you could play the entire alpha version, and they updated it, and you could play the new versions every time they came out. And you got the beta and you got the full version, all from you just paying during the alpha. That is what they're doing with Kerbal Space Program. It's still an alpha, so there are a ton of things that are eventually going to be in the game, and they've already added a ton of stuff based on, well, from what it originally was. Now I have only recently got into it as far as playing. I've watched some other people play it. Scott Manley is definitely, I guess I give him a free plug from nobody on YouTube there. He's definitely a great person to watch for Kerbal Space Program. And that is where I get some of my ideas from. Now, where I was going with all of this originally, the recovery of a spacecraft. Essentially, what it is planned to do. You can see here when we hover over a spacecraft, it has a cost and an amount in stock, and we see that we have 999 in stock, and there's nothing on our screen anywhere that's any kind of monetary or point system of any kind. So this does not do anything at this moment in the alpha of Kerbal Space Program. But obviously it is a planned feature. I assume in the career mode, which is a non-selectable option when you start a new save file at this moment in Kerbal Space Program. So in the career mode, I'm assuming that you will have a very limited stock and a limited budget for what you can do, and you would want to make everything as reusable as possible so that you could keep your stock up and not have to keep spending more money on disposable crap, which is unfortunately what many space programs have done in real life. Lots of disposable things, but we won't go into that either. So what have we got here? We've got a spacecraft that is seemingly capable of making orbit if we just do a little bit of tweaking. So we're going to do that in the next episode, but for now I think we're going to go ahead and end it there. So until next time, I am the Magic Napalm. Good luck.